Hey smart people, Tobi Salami here. In this video, we're going to talk about 5 different Query Builder common mistakes and fixes. In the first place, we're going to discuss regarding getting a dynamic list of items into your form, how you should avoid common mistakes and what you can do to fix them. In the second place, we're going to talk about the difference between a query ID and a custom query ID. Did you know there was a difference between these two? We're going to talk about when you should use what. In the third place, we're going to talk about the query class name and demonstrate how you can make use of that to get your query to do exactly what you need it to do. The fourth thing we're going to talk about is the current WP query, that query, and when you're going to make use of it and what common mistakes you could avoid. And in the fifth and last place, we're going to talk about query arguments and variables and when and how they should be used, especially in a REST API use case. This is specifically important as you integrate JetEngine with other systems such as a headless WP setup or something like that, or maybe connecting 2 WordPress sites together and showing data on one site on another site, something like that. Anyways, we're going to talk about all of this. So let's start with the very first one. The first is when your form needs to have a dynamic list of items. So let's come to the backend, and what we want to do now is to come inside of JetFormBuilder. Inside of here, we want to create a new sample form. The entire reason for creating this form is because we want to have a list of items inside of our form. So let's say that the form we're creating is a form in which we want the user to select from a list of posts on the WordPress website. So let's say select from lists of posts. Something like this is completely fine. We could just say start from scratch for now. We can remove the hidden field. We can also remove the text field right here. And right here, we want to add a simple select field. The point of adding the select field is that we need a list of items inside of here that will essentially be a list of posts. So how do we fill those options from using the query builder? It's pretty simple. First off, we need to create the query. So we can come to JetEngine, come to Query Builder and create the query. Let's see, we have a number of posts here. So let's just create a query of posts. So we'll come inside of add new query and click on this. Let's add a name. Let's say lists of posts. Let's just call it that. That's okay. Inside of query type, we're going to select post query. That's fine. And down here, we want to select the post type of posts. That's fine. The post status of published, that's okay. And preview results, let's see if we have a list of posts. We have 55 posts inside of here. That's completely fine. Let's limit this to maybe 10, just, for the sake of having a few number of posts showing at a time. So 10 is fine. We can click on add new query. And now we have our query of 10 posts. That's okay. Now we want to come inside that form. And inside of field options from, we want to select generate dynamically. A reason for doing this is because we want to select get values list from JetEngine query. Now, this is where some people make mistakes because they get confused here. Inside of field name, they wonder, well, what do we put inside of here? Some would type in here, okay, we need posts, or let's say post title or something similar. And that is not right. What is expected inside of the field name are at least 3 different parameters. The first of these 3 different parameters leads us to the next thing we're going to be talking about. Remember that we said we're going to be talking about when to use a query ID versus when to use a custom query ID. And right here is when we use the real query ID. And where do we get that from? We come back inside of that query we created, come inside of real query ID, which you see inside of here, and copy that. If you at this point add in a custom query ID and type in what that custom query ID is, let's say lists of posts is what we choose to call it. The fact is that this will not work inside of here. What you need is the real query ID. So let's type that inside of here. That is 138. That's what we see right here. Okay. Now, when we do that, we want to add a pipe character press a pipe character on your keyboard. And the next thing you want to put inside of here is what will be the value that will be sent to the database or to wherever you need it to be sent via the form submit action. For example, if you need this to connect whatever you're selecting here with a particular post, the value that will be inside of here will be the post ID. And so we're going to grab that here. If you need to fetch the post title and maybe you want the post title to be sent to a person who needs to know maybe via email, let's say there's a form submit action here via email to be sent to someone that says, okay, this person selected this particular post, okay? And you grab that post from there as the subject of that email, but you need the name or the title of the post instead of the ID. What you have to do here is add the post title like this. Grab it from here as post title and put that inside of here. And that becomes the value. First, you put the ID of the query. Next, you put the value, whatever you want to make use of, like the ID or the post title. In this case, let's say I want to make use of the ID. So I'm just going to type inside of the ID, which you have right here. Next, you have another pipe character, which will then separate what will show to the user who is making use of the form. And keep in mind, you can make use of the same parameters in both. For example, you could also type ID right here. And what that means is that you're going to see inside of the form a list of IDs. But if you need to see the list of all of the posts by the post title, then what you need to select here instead would be the post title. So let's copy that and bring that inside of here. Okay. Now, these are things you can add. At least these 3 parameters can be added here in order to make this make sense. Once you're done with this, all you need to do is click on publish. Once you're done, you need to come inside of the editor and you need to select that form right here. I think I called the form select from list of posts. So I'm going to select from a list of posts. Okay, this is good. Let's come to the front end. I want to see what form is appearing in the front end here and what the dynamic options are. As you can see in the front end, what you have the opportunity to select from here are a list of posts where the post titles are showing right here. And the reason for that is that we have the post title as the option to be shown here and the ID as the value which will be sent if a particular post is selected. It should be sent or used in any way you choose to make use of it. Now that's 1.5 of the Query Builder common mistakes and fixes, because we've talked about making use of the query ID or the real query ID, and that's what we made use of right here. The second we want to talk about is the custom query ID. When do we make use of that and how's that different from the query ID? Let's show you that. If you come back here, let's just save the form and close this out as we're done demonstrating things here. We want to come inside of listings and create a simple listing of posts. We're going to use the same listing source as the query builder and the query as list of posts. Great. Now we can come to listing name. We can say lists of posts. Let's move ahead. Click on create listing item. Now inside here, we're just going to do a simple listing. We're just going to add a container, and inside of that container, we're just going to add the post title, and that will be all. Let's just select the container, and that should be a full width container. Inside of that, we're going to add a dynamic field, and that will fetch the post title for us. That's okay. We can just add a little bit of styling here to make things look pretty simple and sweet. Maybe 16 pixels. And inside of here, we want to add padding of what, maybe 1 EM, and maybe give it a background color so that everything looks nice and beautiful of, let's say, white. Okay, let's click on publish. Let's come back here to the front end. And what we want to do here is a test of a possibility. Let's remove the form. Let's add a new listing here. The first listing grid we're going to add is a listing grid, which we're going to select that list of posts listing, which we just did. So let's just select that list of posts listing. That's okay. Let's make that to column. That's fine. We can come down here and give it an equal columns height so that things look nice and simple. This is beautiful. Now we have a single listing grid here. Let's give it a heading. Let's just call that list of posts. We can select here, give it color white, and call that list of posts. Let's duplicate that and bring that heading down below and call this list of something else. So let's duplicate that listing. I want to show you a situation where you have two different listing grids on the exact same page and when the custom query ID is absolutely necessary. So now for this second listing grid, instead of using the exact same listing, we're going to use custom query here and use a completely different query. So first of all, let's create that. It's a query of a particular post type that I already created and have just one post inside of it. So let's just say listing of sends posts. Something like that is okay. Inside of here, we're going to select the post type of posts and down here, published. Nope. Let's change that post type from post to sends. Okay, that makes sense. We add query. Let's come back to the front end. We're going to select now what that listing was and change the query to that listing of sends posts. So to do that, we want to refresh and we want to select that query here. Now the idea here is that we want to show in the front end two different listing grid items. So let's show that. Come to custom query for the second listing and we want to select listing of sends posts. Okay, we have just one item here and that's okay. We click on publish, come to the front end, let's refresh that. Now we want to also have a filter that will filter this post and see what happens when we create a filter. Let's do that, a simple filter. Let's come to all filters. We're going to have a simple filter here and all the filter will be, let's add a new filter. We're going to say filter by categories, something like that. It's okay. And inside of here, we want to select the select option, filter type. And down here, the data source, we want to say taxonomies and use the categories taxonomy, which we have right here. And by default, this is supposed to filter the post type by the categories that is selected here. And that should work. We're going to toggle on show empty terms so that all of the terms show. Once we're done with this is fine. We click on update. Now we're going to have this filter here. Let's come to the editor again. We want to refresh. The point of that is that we want to put that filter inside that editor. Filter by categories, and that's a select filter. So let's just select the select filter right here. We want to put it right at the top here. And we want to select that filter by posts, by categories. Great. Filter by categories, and we can see all of the categories right here showing. We don't care about the design right now. What we care about is to select the actual parameters that make sense. So this filter is we're going to say it's for JetEngine. That makes sense. And now we're going to just click on publish. And when we publish, we want to come to the front end here and we want to refresh. We have the filter showing at the top. Now let's try to select category called beauty. Let's just select beauty and we see it filtered and gave us all of the items inside of beauty. Great. This is nice for list of posts. Let's select love. Nice. It filters just correctly and shows us all of the items inside of love. But something you're not noticing is that when you scroll down here to list of something else, what happened? Did you see? That it now looks like both of those listing items have become duplicated. And this is where people get confused. This is where they go like, wait, what's going on? We need to filter just the first one. And the common mistake here is that they may think that the listing grid that is closest to the filter is the one that will be filtered. But that's not correct. The one that's filtered by default is all of the listing grids that appear on the page. If you want a particular listing grid to appear on the page, then you need to use what we know as the custom query ID. Now let's come back inside of the query and let's select the custom query ID. We'll come inside of Query Builder for the particular query that matters in this particular situation, and that is list of posts. So let's come inside of custom query, and what we want to type inside of here is, let's call it lists of posts, just like that, okay? And we want to copy that, click on update query. Let's refresh to be sure that things are saved and ready to go. Let's come back inside of that editor and we want to select that particular listing grid. But before we do that, inside of the filter itself, inside of query ID, you want to use the custom query ID. Here, you do not want to use the real query ID, but the custom query ID. So type that inside of there as list of posts and select the listing that you want to be affected by that query. Come to advanced, come down here to CSS ID, and you want to select again list of posts or add list of posts inside of there as the query ID. Once you're done, click on publish, come to the front end. We want to see what happens now. Let's refresh. Now, when we refresh, we want to select again the category of love, and we see it filters it just beautifully. Now we want to scroll down and see what had happened with the other listing grid. Did it have any change to it? No change at all. If we change this again to something else, let's say rush as the category here, you see nothing happened to this one. And why is that? Because no matter the number of listing grids you have on the page, the one which you selected the custom query ID inside of the filter right here, and the one which you designated as the actual listing grid item right here inside of CSS ID, and the same CSS ID selected as the custom query ID right here inside of the query becomes the listing grid that is affected. So all of those three, the query, the filter, and the listing grid, are connected with the query ID, the custom query ID. You've seen the situation where we need to make use of the real query ID inside of forms as one example. You've also seen a situation where you need to make use of the custom query ID inside of a listing of posts as an example. And so that's the difference between the query ID and the custom query ID made clear. The next thing we want to consider is when to use a query class name. And in this particular situation, I'm just going to show you inside of the query so you can understand it. What we want to do here is come back inside of the query builder, and we want to see how to make use of the query class. Let's assume that for the listing of posts, there is a particular meta field inside of each of those post items that is called ratings. For the sake of this demonstration, let's just assume that it exists. Now, if we want to order by that ratings or whatever is the ratings number, let's say it's between the number 1 and 5, and for some posts we have 2, for some we have 5, for some we have 3, and so on. Let's say that we want to ensure that only posts that have more than a rating of 2 show up inside of this particular query. And we also want to make sure that we order the posts on the page by the highest rating. So we want posts with the rating of 5 to show before the posts with the ratings of 2. So how do we do that? First of all, we're going to select that field key name. We're also going to say that we want the comparison factor to be greater than or equal to 2. And the reason for that is that we want ratings that are below the value of 2 to not show up inside of this query, and that's fine, right? But once we're done with this and we select the type as numeric in case that's a number field, we want to then under our class name select what our class name is. And the reason for selecting the class name is because we want to order by the ratings. So let's say that the class name here is ratings of posts. Whatever we type in here is entirely our choice. But where do we make use of it? Here's a simple way to make use of this. Once all of these things are filled in, you want to come inside of general, come down here to where you have order and order by, and remember that what we want to order by is the ratings. So what do we select here? You're going to select the meta clause you added right inside of here, you recall, right here. You're going to select that, and that will now order this entire post by that meta clause, which means order it by the meta field of ratings. And the order here, we want to maybe select highest to lowest order, which will then show all of the posts with the ratings of 5 before those with the ratings of 4, before those with the ratings of 3, and so on. That is when you make use of the query class name inside of the query builder. Let's talk about number 4. When the current WP query matters. I'm going to show you that right now. And to explain that, that's pretty simple. So let's just explain it. If you come inside of categories here, let's just select categories and see all the categories we have here. You can also see the number of posts belonging to each of those category items, right? Great. Now let's select beauty as an example and view it in the front end. Let's just view beauty. We can see here that the listing shows nothing for now. How do we get it to show what exists on the current archive page? This is where we make use of the WP current query or current WP query. Let's come to Query Builder and add a new query. We're just going to call it, for the sake of this, current WP query. This is WP, not QP. Come to query type and you want to select here the current WP query kind of query. And this is nice because what this helps you to do is you're able to select each of the posts per page and select the taxonomy archive of categories and say for that we need only 5 items to show there. And let's say for another post type of post, let's say we need only 8 items to show there, and so on. We can add all of these definitions. But what's important is that the current WP query can be used in multiple different places and will evolve depending on where it is placed. So let's see that as an example. Once we add this query, we can come inside of the archive page that makes this up. Let's come inside of the Crocoblock theme builder, and our main aim here is to come inside of the template that makes this page up. Come inside of template for archive, we want to edit that content, and inside of there we want to select this listing grid and change the query to what we just created. Then let's see what happens. Once we select that listing, we want to come inside of here. Let's just select listing of posts right here, listing of posts listing, that's fine. And down here we want to select custom query and we want to say use custom query, and inside of here we want to select the current WP query right here. That's the last one right there. Now click on publish. We can refresh, see what happens. We have a list of all of the posts that are inside of the beauty archive page. Let's try to view a different archive. Let's try to view those inside of the love page. Let's select that. You can see that's different. This is the beauty. You can see the number of posts there and the list of posts there. Come to love, you can see it's different, and that evolved depending on the page where it was placed. So basically, don't get confused with the current WP query. It's meant to just show what should by default show when you load up a page that's a WordPress page, like a terms page. What should show on that page by default? This current WP query will show that. Okay, we've taken 4 different common mistakes so far. We're down to the last one, when query argument or variable should be used, and we're going to use a REST API case. Now this is a little bit advanced, so you have to pay attention to it. Come inside of Query Builder and we want to select the list of posts. Now when we select that, we want to come down here to where we have the register REST API endpoint. Once we toggle that on, what we have now done effectively, once we click on update query, is to expose this list of posts, and that's defined by restricted access here. So we can say that public can view it, and that means there's no restrictions. We can also select users with specific capabilities or users with specific user roles. Either of those work for us. But that's not the point of this particular tutorial. What we're focusing on is the query arguments. We could add whatever we want to add inside of the namespace, inside of the endpoint path. It really doesn't matter. Whatever we select there makes up what we know as the endpoint URL. You can see it adjusting when you adjust it right here. Okay, so let's come back and copy this. And what we want to do now is to open that page inside of a new tab. Let's just enter into that URL right there. And what we have here is a bunch of items inside of that query result. Now, this may all look like rocket science to you if you're not very used to the REST API and how it works, but this is what we know as a JSON return. If you click on this pretty print right here, you can see it very well. What you see here is basically what you see inside of here. So when you come here, you see you have the ID, you have the author, you have all of this very, very nicely done for us. Now, the idea of having something like this done is that we can very easily feed this URL into an AI-assisted coding environment and say, hey, I need you to fetch this list of items for me, and I need you to ensure that all of these are presented in this order. So you could basically ask an AI agent to consume this URL and then make use of whatever is returned there inside of that URL to build out a dynamic layout for you that is maybe based on maybe HTML and CSS, or maybe you want to build that in Svelte or React or any of these other frameworks that can help you build your front ends. Many people are doing that right now. but they're getting confused with how to actually make use of this and make it itself to be dynamic, just as the query builder itself is dynamic. So that's what I want to clear up for you. I want to help you to clear up that confusion by explaining what the query arguments here means. Now, let's say that first of all, you want to have a different number of page items show up per query. So you want the AI agent to be able to define in its code how many items show up inside the query. You don't just want to come inside of the query here, come to pagination and just put the value 10 right there. Of course, if we take out that value 10 right there and maybe return that to the number 1 and update the query, if you come inside again of that URL and just refresh, see what you have here? Click on pretty print, you see you have only one item, just one ID. Now, that's fine and that works, but you don't want to have to create a query every single time that you want to change the number of items that are returned, right? You want to make this itself dynamic. You want to make the number of items that show inside of that lists of items returned in the API to be itself dynamic. To make that happen, what you want to do is to make this to be dynamic. And to do that, enter query argument. Let's come inside of query arguments now. And what we want to put inside of here is something such as page count. Let's just call it page count for the sake of this, right? Now, when you select page count, inside of default value, you want to select the value, let's say 2 as an example, okay? Now, inside of post per page, because now this is part of the arguments and can be used inside of this API, this REST API endpoint, we want to now select that post per page and put inside of there the dynamic page count. To do that, we want to copy page count, come inside of here, and this is where we make use of the query variable. And when you select that, inside of here, you want to paste the same page count. Now, what we've done right now is to dynamically give this query the ability to mutate or to change its form based on what the query argument entered inside of here is. Let's click on update query so that everything is nice and updated. We want to come inside of the front end again and refresh this. Next, we want to click on pretty print and see how many items we have here. We have 1 and 2. Now, why does that make sense? Because we just specified inside of here that the query argument by default of page count should be 2. Then we returned that value by virtue of the query variable inside of the post per page as 2, right? And that's the reason why by default it selects the value of 2. And so it returns 2 as the number of items on this page. But then we have the ability to mutate this. And how does it mutate it? Let's copy this, come to the front end. Let's click on this URL and paste that inside of here. Now, if you just paste that inside of here, what you have here is still the value 2. So it means that the page count will still return 2 items. But what happens now when you change this from 2 to 1 and click on enter? Let's see what happens. Click on pretty print. Here you go. Now, what does that mean for you? It means that inside of your query, you can basically expose every single one of these items by simply selecting here the query variable and typing in a query variable name for each of these items, whatever those items are. Even if it's a meta query clause and you want to make this itself dynamic, you can do all of that using this query argument in combination with the query variable. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that that was not too much of an advanced situation to portray here. If this is something that you want me to cover sometime in the future, maybe using this with AI agents to explain how the front end is going to function by virtue of what I just showed here, let me know in the comment section below. Anyways, people, that's all I had to show you today. 5 different common mistakes and the fixes for you to be able to make use of Query Builder in the most effective way possible. If you like this kind of videos, let us know in the comment section below. If you want a different topic or something else covered, even an advanced use case such as building an AI-assisted front end in combination with JetEngine as the back end, which many people are doing right now, let us know in the comment section below and we'll be happy to cover that in the future. My name is Tobi Salami as always, and until next time, smart people, stay dynamic.